Hey there, welcome back. So today I think this is going to be pretty brief because I just want to go over some speculations I have with regards to Rock and Roll Marathon Series and several of their races. But first, I am signed up for a race that I had done 3 years ago. 2 years ago? Did it in 2017, so 3 years ago. I'm running it again. It is one of the very few races that I can find to do. And it's because it is a relatively small race, and it's within a state park, so it's very easy for them to limit the amount of people running, limit the amount of contact between people, etc. So I'm going to discuss my first time running that race next week, but I will actually have some new race footage, so look forward to that. The race is on Halloween, so Patreon people will have already seen about the race that weekend, or before that weekend. The rest of you will be seeing that on the weekend. So, but yeah, I'm really excited for that. So, moving on. Rock and Roll Marathon Series, a couple of months ago, I think July and August, they were posting a lot of updates about their races on their Facebook and Instagram and Twitter pages. A lot of them saying that they will, the wording to some of them led a lot of commenters to kind of think that the races will never happen again, and this is again my speculation on what was meant. There were a number of races that they are still planning on running next year. Majority of them happen later on in the year, so October, November. So I think that's kind of partly why those are still on, like Las Vegas and a few others. They're also predominantly in states that don't have the restrictions that some do. And they are predominantly races that I believe Rock and Roll set up entirely. I know in my Montreal video I talked about the fact that when I ran it, they were talking about it being an anniversary, and according to my medal, that seemed to be when the races first started with regards to Rock and Roll. It seemed that the race had been going on prior to Rock and Roll putting their name on it, and they basically just bought the rights to have their name and do all the stuff with it. So I think a lot of the races that they have said that they're not running next year and have that kind of questionable, we're looking at the future of this race line, are races that they basically put their name on that aren't ones that they started themselves, like Chicago, Philadelphia, Montreal, and a number of others. Some of them also are the ones that they're not running next year, are in states that have higher restrictions, or the races are earlier in the year, like I know they said New Orleans was one that they're not doing next year, and that's because that happens in February. They do it kind of in tandem with Mardi Gras. So, and with what happened in New Orleans this past year with the pandemic, it's understandable that the city of New Orleans is like, no, we don't want thousands of people descending upon us and spreading disease. That, to me, I think is the major thing with these races, is the state and city ordinances are probably telling rock and roll that you cannot do these races next year. And I honestly think that they'll be back after next year, given, that Rock and Roll Marathon Series is still around. They're owned by Ironman, so I think they should be okay with funding, but who knows. But to me personally, think that all these races will return eventually. It's just that going into next year, they know they're not going to be able to run these races, so they're kind of looking at what might we have to do for the future. Las Vegas, like I said, is one that is not in danger so far, because that's kind of their flagship. It's their race. I don't know that anyone else ever had anything to do with it. It's kind of like, anyone familiar with the comic convention circuit, you have three big companies, Creation, Fan Expo, and Wizard World. And they're the ones that kind of run a lot of the bigger name ones. And, like, I've been to the Fan Expo Boston, but I was there 2 years before Fan Expo took over. So, that's the way I'm looking at the rock and roll races, is that a majority of these races already existed. It's just rock and roll saw them and thought, hey, why don't we put our name on this and get a few thousand more people to come in and run your race? So, I think that's kind of what it is. And cities like Philadelphia and Chicago are currently like, we can't do anything next year because we don't know what's going to be going on. We don't want to take any chances, because that's another thing I got thinking of too, was that these races cost a lot of money in certain areas, and it could just be that rock and roll isn't seeing a feasible way forward at the moment, and that once things kind of slow down, straighten out, which for all intents and purposes we could be at this for a while, but they're kind of looking forward, thinking that they might need to find something else that might not cost them as much for a period of time. They won't have the ordinances, won't have the financial impact that some of these cities do. So, all in all, I think that we will see a lot of these races come back. It's just that right now, everything's kind of up in the air, and they just put it out that way so that people would understand if down the line the races didn't come back. But this was basically just a reaction to me seeing a lot of people seeing those statements and thinking that the races are just done forever. I don't think they are. I think they'll still run, but they might not run with the rock and roll name attached. We'll see what happens. Right now, everything's kind of up in the air with a lot of things, so we just have to wait and see. In the meantime, if you like rock and roll, the Marathon Series, they are doing a lot of virtual races. They are selling a lot of items on their website, so if you like them, go support them. Keep them going, because when everything's back under motion, they'll need to have had at least some finances going their way to continue. So, yeah. Other than that, I recommend supporting local races anyway. There's nothing wrong with Rock and Roll Marathon Series. I've really enjoyed them, but, you know, it's nice to see smaller races get some attention. So, and with that, I'll leave you until I discuss a small race near me next week. So until then, remember, we're in it for the long run. Peace and love.